Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're jumping into GameMaker and continuing on with our quest system. So let's come into our objects and let's make a new one. I'm just going to call this quests. You could call this obj quests or however you name your objects. Sometimes I like to just call my system objects just their name. So that's what I'm going to do. And let's come into its create event. Let's get to work creating the grid. All right, so to create a grid data structure, we use ds grid create, and then we have to give it a width and height. And then this is going to return the ID of that data structure grid, and then we have to save it into a variable. So I'm going to call that ds quests. But now I want to make this variable so that if I change my kind of grid later to take in, so say 5 columns of data, 5 elements of my quest instead of 3, then I want it to just do that. I want it to just look at my data and then know how wide and tall to make the grid. So we'll come back to that in a second. For now, let's actually think about declaring the quest data in here. And the thing is, when we are creating a grid, the way that grid data structures are accessed is we go dxquests hash and then we give it a coordinate. So this is just how we access a grid. This is the accessor that we use. There's different ones for different data structures. And then this is the coordinate of the cell. So this is the x coordinate and this is the y coordinate. So 0 is going to be the first column. So the first column, and then it says 1 for the y value. So we're going to be the second y column. So that cell. And to set up all of our cells, we would have to write this for every single quest. Like that, right? So we were having our title in the first column, then our quest stage in the second column, and then the array of quest stage descriptions in the third column, right? And we would have to do that for every single quest. So you can imagine this is going to get quite annoying to have to type this out every single time. A quicker way to do this might be I'm going to create this quest array. So we can actually declare arrays over multiple lines like this, right? So I just have these square brackets over multiple lines. And then everything in here is going to be an entry. So I'm actually going to have arrays within arrays here, and every array, like this, is going to be a new quest. And then I'm going to run this through a script, and it's going to spit out the grid all ready for me. So I can take this and just put it in here, like that. Although I might do this over multiple lines just to make it a bit clearer. And I put 0 actually, so not -1, because I'm actually going to start this quest to be already running in our game, just so we can test it. So at the moment, we've only got 1 entry, but we could have multiple other ones. For example, I've just got a couple other ones here. So I've got a picking mushrooms quest and escorting a green knight, but we're going to go over the logic for this one together. So those are my 3 quests, and you could write a couple like this. So this one is starting off running already, but these 2 are not running yet. And then we're going to run this quest array through a script, and we're going to write this script, and we're going to call it create ds grid from array, and we're going to put that quest array into it. So let's come into our scripts and create this thing. So let's type in the description. So this is what's going to come up in the autocomplete when we type in create ds grid from array. And then it's going to have 1 argument, which is just the array that we give it. And now we are going to create a grid from it. And we're going to have it return the ID of the grid at the very end. So let's start off with naming a few variables. So I'm going to have a ds grid, and this is going to be the thing that we eventually save the ID of the grid in, and we return ds grid. So that return just means it's basically once the script is run, it's going to come out of it and we can save the outcome kind of this script, the value that it's found. So secondly, we can get the array argument, and we'll just save that in a variable called array. So this is argument 0. Now to create the grid, we can just write ds grid equals ds grid create, and now we have to decide how wide and how high it's going to be. And the way I'm going to do this is basically look at this array, and then I'm going to look at the very first entry. So I'm going to look at basically this one here, and I'm going to see how many elements it has. You might have other ones that have more elements, and so this script, you might have to iterate through it and find the one with the longest number of elements. So these all just have 3, and it's going to look at that and it'll create that as the width. And the height is just going to be the number of quests. So this one, again, it has 3, but we're going to get those via code. And to do this, we need the height and width of those arrays. So we need to go the number of quests, which is going to be just the length of the array, right? So that's the length of this array right here. So 1, 2, 3. And then we also need the number of entries in those quests. So I'm just going to go the width of that first entry in the quest array. So just the first quest, how many elements are in it. And I'm going to use that for the width and height. So array width and the number of quests. Great, so we've now created the grid at the right size for us, but now we have to kind of iterate through our arrays right here and put them into the correct slots. So we're going to use a loop. So you could use a for loop or a repeat loop for this. I'm just going to use a repeat loop. And basically, if you haven't used these before, you just tell it how many times to repeat, and it will run whatever's in here that number of times. So the number of times I want it to repeat is basically the number of quests that there are, because that's how many quests that we're going to have to slot into the grid. So we already have that number right here. We can use this. That's the number of times I want to repeat. And now I want to also be iterating through the array. So firstly, I want to access the first entry, and then I want to access the second one, slot that in, third one, and slot that in. So I'm going to need some variable for doing that. And I'm going to call this YY. So at the bottom, every single loop, we're just going to get this to increment by 1. It's starting at 0, and it's going to go 0, 1, 2, and that will increment through the entire array. So now I'm just going to get something that's going to hold the specific quest array that we're working on. So quest array, and I'm going to have that be that entry in our big array. Right? So that is just getting one of these right here, depending on what number we're on. And then once we've done that, then we also need to iterate through all of the entries. So now, again, if you have different numbers of elements in your quest types, then you're going to be wanting to get length of the array that you're currently working on every time we loop. But if they all have exactly the same one, then we can just use this right here that we've already gotten, because we know all of our ones are going to be the same. Otherwise, you would want to have this loop in here repeat by the array length 1D of the array YY. So we are looping through again. Again, we're going to need a variable to increment. So I'm going to use XX. I'm going to increment that too. Now finally, we can actually start filling the grid. So we can go dsgrid, that's the name of our grid right here. And then the cell coordinates of the grid is just going to be XXYY. Because that will be getting, remember XX means these ones right here, either 0, 1, or 2, and then YY is going to mean what array that we're on. So that way we are going to get something that looks like the grid in our kind of Excel spreadsheet. So we just have to set that to whatever current quest that we're working on, whatever the XX entry of that is. So hopefully that makes sense. And once all of that is done and the grid is filled, then we return the ID of the grid. We can come back to our quests now. Remember to, of course, name the script if you haven't done that. Create dsgrid from array. Right, and then we have our quest array all set up. So now, if we just put this quest object into our game, it can be in any layer, and I'm going to run this in debug mode because I actually want to have a look at my data structure itself and see if it has created the data structure properly. So we're going to run it, and then we're going to come into GameMaker. We're going to pause this, and I'm going to have a look. Let's find the quests. And this right here is our data structure. So at the moment, we can't look at it because it's not reading it as a grid. So if we come here and then we right click on it, we can view it as a DS grid, and we should get a little plus here. So open that up, and we should have, this is good, 3 entries to it. And you can see here, so this is the first column of the grid, and we're getting all of the titles. So that's exactly what I wanted to see. That's good. The second one, it's showing what stage we're in. So good, 0, -1, -1. And then this is the array for the descriptions. Okay, so that is what you should be seeing. Now that that is working, we've got the information all set up, but we need to actually start making the code for the quest. And we're going to be running this in the step event of our quests object. So what I'm going to do is while this is running, so while stage of this quest is equal to 0, we should be painting a tree red. So I want some code to check if the player is colliding with a tree, and if it is, I'm going to turn the tree red. So that's how I'm going to code it. But of course, we also want to set up the architecture for running any quest. So I'll show you how to do that too. So now we have to think about the possibility that not just one quest has to be run, but multiple quests. Potentially every single quest in the entire grid. So we're essentially going to have to loop through our grid and check what stage a quest is on, and then run the appropriate stage or don't run anything if it is inactive. So we're going to have to do another repeat loop or for loop. So I'm going to repeat, and then again, I need the quest number, the number of quests. So since this is something that is coming up a lot, I'm just going to make a variable for it in our create event. So ds quests number, and this is going to be ds grid height of our quest. So this is getting the height of the actual grid of this one right here. All right, so we're going to use that variable right here for our repeat loop. We're going to have a variable to be looping through our grid. So I'm going to use just I. I'm going to start at 0, of course, because that's going to be the very first row, which is where our first quest is. And then every time we increment that I variable. And basically every time we need to check firstly, so what quest are we accessing from the grid? And then depending on what quest we're currently looping through, we need to run its code. So this is where we're going to put all the code. And to do this, I'm going to use a switch statement. So I'm going to switch what I is. So a switch statement is, if you haven't used one of these, it's kind of like an if-else statement. So I'm basically asking switch I, so whatever I is equal to, and then we write our cases for the possibilities that it can be equal to. So it's just going to be numbers starting from 0 and going on to how many quests you've got. And we just write our cases here and then breaks. But this 0, if you've got dozens and dozens of quests, these numbers aren't going to be very descriptive for you, and it might be a lot easier if you have, say, something like a string or words that indicate what the quest is. And to do this, because we know that our position of all the quest data is fixed in the grid, so this is always going to be at position 0, this is going to be at position 1, 2, I'm going to create an enumerator here that matches that index. So this is how we're going to do it. So we're going to type enum and then quest. Right, and so this is kind of declaring a little subtype of variables. And we can put all of our different quests here. So we can say paint things, and I've got picking mushrooms and escort green knight. Right, and we just comma them like this. And what this actually does is now, when I type quest dot paint things, for example, this is going to equal this entry in the enumerator. And generally what you can do with enumerators is write like this, so make it equal to numbers. And these can be anything you want, just so that now whenever I write this, it's exactly the same as if I had just written 0, which is what we want. So we want this to be kind of an index of what it's going to be in our quest grid. So what row is it going to be? And you don't actually have to put any numbers if you just want it from chronological order starting from 0, because it actually does that by default if you just comment them like this. So if we just do that, and then you can keep going down with all of your quests like that, and then now you don't have to use a number, we can just put like that. This is going to contain the quest logic for paint things. And we can set up the other ones like quest and then dot. And see, the other good thing about this is that it's now going to come up in the autocomplete. So I've got picking mushrooms here and quest dot escort green knight. And the other good thing about doing it this way is that I don't actually have to do it in chronological order. So I could put this up here. It doesn't matter. It's just saying case 0, remember? Because that was the same as writing 0. And then this says case that it's equal to 2. So it doesn't matter what order you put these in, the switch statement is still going to find the one that I is equal to. And so because these can get a bit long, what I think is a good way to keep them separate is to use these region codes. So what these do, if you just write region and then end region, is it wraps all of the code in here. So this could be a very long block of code, but everything in here, if I just toggle this little thing here, it wraps it all up into a region. So that way, if I'm working on this one, I don't have to see the other ones. And you can put titles just like that. So right now, we're just going to be working on the painting things one. All right, so now we've gone through this loop. We've decided that I is on its first iteration. the first thing that we have to actually check is that this is equal to something larger than -1. Because if it's -1, we just want it to quit. And then otherwise, if it's equal to other things, it's going to be running different code. So if it's equal to 0, it's going to be doing the code for painting a tree red. 1, it will be doing this one, and 2 is the last one. So again, we are going to use another switch statement. So we are going to switch, and then the thing that we're switching is what is this currently equal to. So we have to get this entry from our grid. So the second column in the first row. Firstly, we need access to the grid. So what I'm going to do is, because I think we're going to be accessing this grid a lot, and we might actually have to be going into other instances. So I'm going to make an instance variable, and I'm just going to do it up here like this, because now this contains a pointer to our grid that we can use no matter what instance we're in. So if we're in a with statement with another object, we can still access the grid here because this is a local variable, not an instance variable. So now we can use grid, and then we are accessing, so not the first 0 column, but the second column, because that's where we store the quest stage data. And then as for what row it is, so we could put quest.paintthings because we know we're in that, or we could just put I, because it'll just be whatever I is currently on. Just like that. And now we have a bunch of cases for what this is going to be equal. So we know that for -1, in the case that it's -1, we don't want it to do anything. We could just have it break. Or you don't even have to name it in here. But in the case that it is 0, so we are going to start doing the quest logic for painting a tree red. Okay, so now let's have a think. My player object is called objking. You might be called objplayer or oplayer. That's all fine. What I'm going to get it to do is get the player to check if it's colliding with a tree, right? And then if it is colliding with a tree, I'm going to turn that tree red, and I'm going to increment this variables because we've completed that stage of the quest. So let's go with objking or whatever your player object is. And so now for the collision function, we could use place meeting, right? So that's the standard collision function. We give it an XY position and an object. But I want to get the ID of the object that we collide with because I want to be turning it specifically red. So I'm going to use instance place. Right, and then this returns the ID if there is a collision with obj green tree is just what I've called it. So you could just set this to whatever object you want. If there is a collision, I'm going to save its ID in that variable inst. Now I can just check if inst is not equal to no one, because no one is what this is going to return if it doesn't find a collision. So if inst is not equal to no one, then in fact there was a collision. Inst is equal to someone, some instance of a green tree. We're going to turn it red. So we're going to go with that instance, right? So with the tree, this is, and we're going to turn its image blend C red. So this is just going to tint it red. And now the last thing that I want to do is just increment this value right here. And we can still access it, even though we've gone into the instance right here, we can still access it because it is a local variable, right? We couldn't have accessed it if we just used this instance variable, but this one is a local variable. We want to now just increment it by 1. All right, so there we go. That is the case for the first bit of the quest. Now, just so that we can track what we're doing, I also want to just draw some of the information about the quest. I just want to pull out the title of the quest and then the description of the stage that we're currently on. And if the quest is equal to -1, then I'm not going to draw anything about it. So again, I'm going to use a repeat loop, just like this. In fact, we could just copy this here, like that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a string. I'm going to set it to just an empty string for now. And then every time we loop, I'm going to first check if the stage is not equal to -1. So if it's equal to something else, then I'm going to add this and this to the string. And then I'm going to draw the result. So you might also want to just set your font first here. Font. So if you haven't created a font, just head over to fonts, create a new one, and a little window will pop up like this, and you can select a font that you want like that. Okay. So I'm going to just use my dialog font, and then I'm going to draw text, and I'm going to actually put transformed. You might want just draw text color, and then you might set it to a certain color, but I'm actually just going to make mine a little bit smaller because my font appears kind of big because my GUI layer is the same size as my view. Yours probably isn't. I'm just going to draw it up the top left-hand corner, and what's going to happen is every line, it's going to have information about a quest, if it's active. So we're just going to draw the string, and I'm just going to scale it down a bit. Okay. And now in here, I'm actually going to add to the string. So we're going to check what stage is it in. So we're going to get the stage first, ds quests 1i, right? So second column of whatever row we're on. And now we just check if the stage isn't -1, then I want to add, so I'm going to add the title and then also one of these. So I'm going to have to access what entry in the array depending on what stage is. Let's create a local variable called array equal to ds quests. And now, of course, the column that we want is the second column, right? That's where we're storing the descriptions of whatever row we're on. Right, and then now I'm going to add to this string because we can actually add to strings. The first thing I'm going to do is put this. So what this actually does is it kind of is a return. It's if you just had pressed enter. So every time it finds that there is an active quest, it's just going to press enter on the string so that it goes to a new line. But otherwise it is just a string of everything added together. But this is going to format it properly for us. And then I'm going to add ds quests, and now the titles, remember, are stored in the first column. So column 0 of whatever I is. Right, so at the moment I've just got the title. What I might do is also just go string upper. So this is going to make all of that in capitals. So the title is going to appear in capitals. And then I'm not done yet. I want to add, I might just put a colon so that it's separating the title from the description. And then I'm going to add the description. And now this one, remember, is going to be whatever this array is here, right? So we already got the array of descriptions right here. And then we need the entry of whatever stage we're in, whatever this is, right? So we need to decide which one of these. So we just put array stage. And there we go. So that should take care of that for us. And now actually one more thing that we should do, which we haven't done, but which you should be thinking about every time you mess with a data structure, is unlike every single other variable which gets kind of deleted from memory when the game stops running or the object gets destroyed, data structures do not, and we have to do our own cleanup. Otherwise, the data structure is going to persist in memory and potentially slow down your game. So we have to remember to come into the destroy or the cleanup event and go ds grid destroy. And then we just give it the index ds quests. All right, great. So we've got our quest logic here for the first stage. We've got our drawing of the information. Let's just actually make these active. Maybe I'll put that on 1. So we should see that one come up for that quest. And I'll put 2 here. So this should come up and let's test that. So I'll run it. There we go. So I've got all of the quest data coming up. So this one, you can see it says to paint a tree red. So let's go up and test if it turns a tree red. There we go. And now we can see that it's prompting us to do the next action. So now nothing's going to happen because we haven't done the quest logic for that. So let's just do that now. In fact, we could essentially just copy this because it's going to be the same kind of logic. So in the case that now it's equal to 1, so instead of turning it red, we want to turn it blue. Now, though we might want it to be a different tree, so maybe we can't paint the same tree blue that we just painted red. So what I'm actually also going to do right here is get the king to save what tree it just painted. So I'm going to get the king, so when I'm with the king, if it does find a collision, I'm going to save the ID of instance as my red tree. And then here I can just check if inst does not equal no one and inst does not equal my red tree, then we'll turn it blue. And then finally, for the very last one, 2, so the final stage of the quest, instead of looking for a tree, I want it to look for a NPC. So I might have it look for one of these. So you might want to put a parent that all of your NPCs are under. So all of my NPCs can actually talk, and I've got a parent called speakers, so I'm just going to use that. Right, and I'll turn them fuchsia. And now, when we get to this point, there's actually not any additional things that we need to do in the quest, so you might want to have some kind of quest complete information here. So we might go, quest complete, you painted lots of things. So let's try that. Let's run it again. And we'll go paint the tree red, and you can see we can't paint it blue. We need to go to another one. There we go. And finally, we need to go and interact with an NPC, so let's go here. There we go, we turn them pink, or purple. And that quest complete dialogue is coming up. So if that was the final stage of the quest, you might also want to add stuff about increasing the player's experience or giving them an item or something. But that is just a little demo of what you can do with this kind of system if you're going to hard code everything. So in a future tutorial, we might look at actually creating quest types so that we don't have to do the logic for all of these. But that is it for today. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you can adapt this system for your own game. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. As always, I'd like to thank everyone who is supporting me on Patreon to make these tutorials. And special shoutouts to Semimyth, Bartholomew Lisfon, Cursed Toast, Danielle Hargrave, Doan Tekben, Fasco, XD Game Studio, Humberto Gonzalez, Hunter T, Ian Seckington, Shake Bunny, The Great Poultry, Thomas M, Max Molinaro, Monju72, Moo Podcasts, Mistara, Ricky C, Straya Moon, Spock 2018, and Semi Metal Alchemist. I hope you guys are well, and I will see you next time.